and welcome to the GrapeSEED Official Podcast. We have an exciting podcast today. Our guest is Rose Hoang, who you may remember from way back in episode 31, the very early days of this podcast. Well, since then, she has started her own GrapeSEED podcast in Vietnam. It is primarily in Vietnamese, so if you can understand Vietnamese, be sure to check it out no matter what country you're teaching in. I'll let her tell us a bit more about it, so welcome back to the show, Rose.
Hi, Adam. Very nice to be back in GrapeSEED Official Podcast.
Welcome. So your podcast, what is the name of it and where can listeners find it?
This question brings back lots of memories of our podcast since day one. We had to build everything from scratch. The name, the content, the format, the setting, and so on. So back then, we had a few ideas in mind, such as Radio of GrapeSEED Vietnam, GrapeSEED Vietnam official podcast, and so on. But we still felt that something was missing until when Phoebe, our marketing manager, suggested Uống Trà Cùng GrapeSEED, or in English, it is Tea Time with GrapeSEED, which I think really poetic. Yeah. So in Vietnamese culture, in the past, we always have tea when we have customers in our house or when we want to discuss something. But now of course, we have coffee and bubble tea and other drinks. But Tea Time with GrapeSEED depicts a scene where people sitting down, chilling, and talking about a topic relating to GrapeSEED. Yeah. And fun fact, Phoebe also suggested that we will have sound effects of pouring the tea for the background music in the intro of our podcast, which set the cozy atmosphere to our discussion. Oh, where can listeners find it? The podcast has now become available on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
Excellent. Yeah, I tried to check it out myself, but my Vietnamese is not very strong, so I couldn't follow the episode very well. And I did notice in the logo that you use for your podcast that there is like a cup, and I wasn't sure if it was coffee or tea. So I'm glad you cleared that mystery up for me too. You had mentioned format a second ago there. What is the format of the podcast, and what kinds of things do you talk about?
Yeah, so again, we consider lots of things, lots of factors. Should it be a monologue where I speak about GrapeSEED, talk about GrapeSEED, or should it be a conversation? And after consulting you and Miklos, after serious discussions with Miklos, especially, and consulting many other radios and podcasts on other platforms, we think it would be best to have a host and a guest invited to discuss specific topics. So it will bring the standpoint of like talking, sharing ideas rather than like a training. And yeah, so if you recall last year, I also reached out to you and asked for some recommendations to start this project. And you suggested that we could have like several series to cover different categories. And I learned it from you. I have 3 series so far. Namely this, let's discover GrapeSEED, how to support my kids at home, and real life stories. Let's discover GrapeSEED provides information about GrapeSEED. For example, our implementation, what age should the kids start GrapeSEED or LeaderSEED, and our support to partners such as like training, coaching, and resources to our customers. Meanwhile, the second one, how to support my kids at home, addresses common questions from parents. For example, like my kids have learned GrapeSEED for 2 years, why they don't communicate with foreigners, for example. Yeah, funny questions from parents, but they really care about their child's learning. And then the last one, the real life stories. We shared inspirational stories from teachers, parents, and school owners.
Excellent. I think that's a really good idea because this, just the type of podcast that we both have, it's not like it's a sports podcast, for example, where they're going to talk about the game or the match last night, and everybody who's listening is interested in hearing about that. We have lots of different types of listeners. I'm sure you have on your podcast some parents, some teachers, and other maybe GrapeSEED Vietnam staff people that are also listening. So what kind of content can you make for each one of them? And it's not always, you can't just make one type of content and everybody will like it. That's why I thought the series would be a good idea for both yours and mine, just to appeal to different people with different types of content. So yeah, that's great that you're going with that. And it sounds like you have some exciting series there.
Sure. And lots of things. Just think of the name of the series is a problem too, like how to make it like more appealing to the listeners, to the readers from the first part.
Yep, but it's tricky. I tried to use, I think people have figured it out by now, I try to use mostly GrapeSEED related like titles of materials and components. So GrapeSEED Friends is, I think it's a song in Unit 21, and then Take a Step, that action activity, that, you know, like all those kinds of things. I try to do that, but yours is a little bit more creative, I think.
And I received lots of support from the marketing team. They helped a lot with the name. I'm so bad at naming things. So yeah, they just helped me out with this process a lot.
Excellent. So far, has there been a particular episode where you heard a lot of positive feedback, and which episode would that be?
It is quite difficult to say which episode has the most positive feedback, because I don't usually like receive like direct feedback from the audience, but we use Anchor to collect the data from listeners. Yeah. So from Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, and web browser. We haven't got the data for season 2 yet, but the data from season 1 shows that most listeners are in favor of episode 8, which is about how GrapeSEED supports its teachers.
Oh.
Yeah.
Goodbye, my friends, goodbye. I'm sad to say goodbye. It was a good day, but now I will say goodbye, my friends, goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.